All right, welcome in to another special edition of What's Right with Nick Wright, the podcast and YouTube show, our countdown of the 50 greatest players of the last 50 years. Now, players 15 through 10, where we're really talking about the true top-tier Pantheon greats, where we talk Isaiah Thomas, Kevin Durant, Giannis, the two best guys on arguably the greatest team ever, Moses and Dr. J, who teamed up on the 83 Sixers, and of course, Steph Curry. Those rankings were a little difficult because 3 of those 6 guys still active players. Hell, when we recorded the Steph Curry segment, his season was still going on. Giannis, what would have happened had he won the title this year? Durant, how much was his ranking affected by them losing in round 1 this year? Spoiler alert, his ranking wasn't actually negatively affected, but it could have obviously been positively affected had they gone on to make the finals or win the title. These 2 guys we get to today, as we are now into the top 9, have been long retired. However, one of them, I'm sure all of you have a litany of fond memories of, and the other, I think, you're going to hear his name be like, I always hear about what a great player he is, and I'm sure you watched him win his titles. But I don't think anybody, I shouldn't say anybody, I think most of you will be shocked by the jaw-dropping numbers. These 2 guys, 9 and 8, spoiler alert, they're both centers, and if you know it's the 50 greatest players of the last 50 years, you probably know who they are now. Their playoff dominance has almost been undersold, even if you know they were dominant. So let's get right into the list. We are down to only 2 people per episode. Eventually, we'll get to 1 person per episode. But number 9 on the list is Shaquille O'Neal.
Number 9, Shaquille O'Neal.
Shaquille O'Neal, we'll go over the resume quickly, and then we'll get to the playoff stuff, and then we'll have a long discussion. 8-time first-team All-NBA. 2-time second-team All-NBA, 4-time third-team All-NBA. That is 14 All-NBA teams, tied for the 5th most ever. He only won 1 MVP, which is insanity, but 8 times he finished in the top 5. He's a 2-time scoring champion. He's 3-time All-Defense. He is 8th all-time in blocks. He is 8th all-time in points. Over his 10-year prime, he averaged 28 points, 12 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 blocks. In year 2, at age 21 years old, fresh out of LSU, he was 29 and 13. That good in year 2. He also was the guy who allowed me kind of set the precedent for me including Luka in my 50 of the last 50 because he was included on the NBA's 50-year anniversary team, even though he'd only been in the league 5 years. Before I get into the playoff stuff, I want to say something about Shaq. I think you could argue, in fact, I would argue, under these parameters, he would be considered the greatest player ever. If the question is, you can have any player in NBA history for 1 game at his apex peak of his powers, who are you choosing? My answer is Shaquille O'Neal. Because as great as Jordan was, as great as Kareem was, as great as LeBron was, even at their apex peak, they might have an off night. It's unlikely, but they might have an off night. As I will prove to you, during Shaquille O'Neal's true apex peak, he never had an off night when he cared. Ever. He had a 3-year run of not only 0 bad finals games, but 15 for 15 on outstanding kick your teeth in finals games. But that's not the only reason he's 9th on the list, but it's one hell of a start. Okay, so let's get to the playoffs. He's a 4-time champion. He has 3 finals MVPs. He has 6 finals appearances, and he was the unquestioned best player on 5 of those 6 finalists. I would argue he was the best player on the 6th finalist, the 06 Heat during the regular season, but in the playoff run, obviously D Wade was the best player. And in fact, here's a shocking stat. Antoine Walker was the second leading scorer during the finals on those Miami Heat teams. Shaq was third leading scorer, but we'll spend more time on that once we get to that year of his career. So let's just go, and this is going to be how we do it. I need to take a sip of this coffee because there are going to be a lot of numbers here. I understand for podcast listeners, even for the YouTube viewers, it can be a lot to process, but I know sometimes you listen to podcasts on 1.5 speed. You might want to even slow this down because we're giving you a lot of numbers, but they are all jaw-dropping. 1994, his first playoff game ever. 24 points, 19 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, 5 blocks. That is his first playoff game of his career. The very next year, the series we pretend didn't happen. Hey, raise your hand if you were the best player on a team that beat Michael Jordan in a playoff series during Jordan's prime. You know who gets to raise his hand? Shaquille O'Neal, and that's it. 1995 against the Bulls. Averages 24 points, 13 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 blocks. To get to the finals in the next round, in the conference finals, averages 27 and 10, including 2 different games with at least 35 points and 10 rebounds. In the finals, against the greatest defensive player of the last 50 years, Hakeem Olajuwon. He's in his 3rd year. He's in the finals against Hakeem. 28 points per game, 13 rebounds per game, 6 assists per game on 60% shooting. But they got swept. Nick Anderson misses the 4 free throws, and the Shaq getting swept was going to be a theme. But when I tell you 28, 13, and 6 on 60% shooting in the finals, now keep this in mind. That will be the worst finals performance we see from Shaq over the next decade. 1996, the very next year, starts the playoffs, or starts round 2 off with a 41, 13, and 6. Gets to the Eastern Conference Finals against those 72-win Bulls, but the Bulls then sweep him. So now he got swept by Hakeem and got swept by Michael. How did Shaq do when he got swept? Just a humble 27 points, 11 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks. That was his average while getting swept. One of the reasons he left. Like, okay, I give you 27, 11, 4, 2, and 2, and I get my ass swept out of the playoffs. Maybe I need to leave. Goes to LA. First playoff game with the Lakers, 46 and 11. And then they play Utah in round 2, loses to Utah, averages for the playoffs 27, 11, and 3. 1998, in his first Western Conference Finals, averages for the playoff run in 1998. Not for a series, not for the entire playoff run in 1998. Shaquille O'Neal averages 31 points, 11 rebounds, 3 assists, 3 blocks, on 61% shooting. In his first Western Conference Finals, he has a 39 and 15, followed by a 38 and 7. Lost both those games because he got swept again. So this is young Kobe. Kobe has the air balls. He's not ready. Shaq, again, on Karl Malone and the defending Western Conference champion Jazz, hangs a 39 and 15, followed by a 38 and 7, loses them both. And now it's like, oh boy. Like, Shaq sure gets swept a lot. The next year, 1999, for the playoffs, averages 27 and 12. But guess what happens to him in round 2? Guy named Tim Duncan is in the league now. He sweeps him. So now Shaq swept again. And people are like, oh boy, as great as Shaq is, and as great as the numbers are, isn't it weird he keeps getting swept? So how does Shaquille O'Neal respond? He responds with what I believe to be the most dominant 3-year stretch of any player in league history. More dominant than anything Kareem, Michael, LeBron, Magic, anyone ever did. So pull up a chair, boys and girls. We're going to need a minute to talk about these 3 years because these are the numbers will prove it to you. 2000 for the playoffs, averages 31 points, 15 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 blocks. One of the most dominant start-to-finish playoff runs ever. But it's not even his best. His best will come next year. He started the playoffs off with a 46 point, 17 rebound, 5 block game. The first 3 games of round 2, 37-14, 38-20, 37-17. He starts off round 3 with 41 points, 11 rebounds, 7 assists, 5 blocks. And then that was the series against Portland. They're up 3-1. They lose game 5. They lose game 6. They're down 15 in the 4th in game 7. And then the iconic Kobe to Shaq dunk to get them in the finals. And then in the finals, and each game of these finals deserves massive recognition, okay? In the finals, game 1, 43 points, 19 rebounds. Game 2, 40 points, 24 rebounds. That was the game Hack-a-Shaq was kind of invented. He shot 39 free throws that game. He missed 21 of them. So he missed 21 free throws, still out of 40 and 24. Game 3, 33 and 13. Game 4, 36 and 21. Game 5, 35 and 11. Game 6, 41 and 12. That's 6 games to win his first ring. His worst game was 33 and 13. Like I said, not his best playoff run, not his best finals. The next year, you could argue this is the greatest team of all time, the 0-1 Lakers. They lost 1 playoff game the entire time. Kobe was ascending and Shaq was, well, unstoppable. For the playoff run, 30 points, 15 rebounds, 55% shooting. Sweeps Portland in round 1. Starts off a sweep of Sacramento with 44 and 21, followed by 43 and 20. Back-to-back 40 and 20s to say, Sacramento, nice try. Next year, you'll have a real chance. Not this year. Now he gets revenge. He sweeps the Spurs in round 3. And then their one loss of the finals, the one loss of the playoffs, game 1, the famous Allen Iverson step-over game. Shaquille O'Neal in that game, 44 points, 20 rebounds, 5 assists. 44, 20, and 5. Game 2, this is the forgotten near quadruple-double. We talk about Tim Duncan almost having a quadruple-double quite a bit. Game 2, he has 28 points, 20 rebounds, 9 assists, 8 blocks. 28, 20, 9, and 8 to even up the series. Averaged for the series, 33, 16, and 5 on 57%, 45 minutes per game. And here's the other thing. Everyone says, oh, well, that Sixers team didn't have enough talent. That Sixers team didn't have offensive talent. But you know who they did have playing center? The defensive player of the year, Dikembe Mutombo. So Shaquille O'Neal in the finals to win his second ring against the defensive player of the year averages 33, 16, and 5 on 57%. The next year, okay, now they're facing real adversity. Kobe and Shaq are starting to fray. They've won back-to-back titles. You know, the only three-peat is Jordan. He's the only guy to do it. Did it twice. Well, the only three-peat post, in the modern era. Down 3-2 to Sacramento. In the historic and questionably officiated Game 6, he hung a 41 and 17 on them, including 13 of 17 at the free throw line. Game 7, he hangs a 35 and 13 on them in a win in overtime, including 11 of 15 from the free throw line. So when Shaq says, I made him when I counted, during their 3 championship years with the Lakers, they only truly faced adversity in 1 series. Well, 2 series. The Portland series, the first year, and then this series. But facing elimination, game 6 and 7, he is a combined from the free throw line, 24 of 32. That's 75%. Okay? In the finals, averages 36 points, 13 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 blocks. The games were as follows: 36 and 16, 40, 12, and 8, 35 and 11, 34 and 10. So those 3 years from 2000 to 2002, Shaquille O'Neal in the finals. 15 finals games, 12 and 3 overall record, averaging 36 points, 15 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 blocks on 60% shooting. Nobody can argue anyone's ever been more dominant in the biggest moment than Shaq during those 3 years. And then we can be quick the rest of the way. In 2003, as the 3-time defending champ, throws up a 29, 15, 4, and 3 against Kevin Garnett in round one. Averages 29, 15, 4, and 3 against Kevin Garnett in round one, including when they were down 2-1 in that series, throws up a 34-point, 23-rebound, 6-assist game. And they end up losing to the Spurs, who go on to win the title. He averages 25, 14, and 4. The next year, they're back in the finals. Everyone on that team struggled, except for Shaq, who once again had to deal with the Defensive Player of the Year, this one in Ben Wallace. How'd he do? 27 points, 11 rebounds per game on 63% shooting. He had a 34-11 and a 36-20. They lost both of those. 2005, he goes to Miami. They instantly get to the conference finals, but they lose to Detroit in 7. And in 2006, he had a couple great playoff moments with the Heat that year. He had a 30-point, 20-rebound, 5-assist game to beat Chicago in round one. And to get to the finals, to get that Heat team to the finals, this was his last really great playoff game. 28 points, 16 rebounds, 5 blocks on 12 of 14 shooting to clinch a finals appearance. And then in the finals, he wasn't great. D-Wade was, and that's kind of the end of it. So how does the all-time playoff resume look? 12 career 40-point playoff games. That's 8th all-time. 55 career 30-point playoff games. That's 8th all-time. 49 career 30-10 playoff games. That's 4th all-time. 12 career 40-10 playoff games. That's 3rd all-time. 25 career playoff games with a game score, that's Basketball Reference's catch-all metric, of at least 30. The only people with more are LeBron and Michael. He's 5th all-time in playoff points. He's 4th all-time in playoff rebounds. He's 4th all-time in playoff box. He's 5th all-time in finals points per game at 28.3. His career playoff average over 216 games, which is 2.5 full seasons of playoff basketball, is 24 points, 12 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 blocks. That's Shaquille O'Neal. That's how you become one of the 9 greatest players ever. We have a Shaquille O'Neal caller. Let's get to him.
Question about Shaq. 1 for 22 in his career from behind the arc. If Shaq played now, do you think he would bomb threes?
He would not bomb threes. And Wilds, who is my beloved colleague and coworker, found a way to almost put a damper on what was just a brilliant 15 minutes of Shaquille O'Neal love. He would need to bomb threes, just like Kevin Durant's asking him how he would guard the pick and roll. And Shaq correctly said, here's the thing, you would not be able to guard me. There is no era in which Shaq would not be utterly dominant. He did it against anyone and everyone. The Defensive Player of the Year doesn't matter. At his peak, no one could hold him under 35 and 15 a game. 9th best player of the last 50 years, Shaquille O'Neal. The 8th best player of the last 50 years is a guy who beat Shaquille O'Neal in one of those finals. You know who he is. We discuss him next. All right, welcome back in. What's Right with Nick Wright? 50 greatest players of the last 50 years. Very fun little surprise for you after we do player number 8 at the end of this episode, which is, well, I don't want to spoil it. You'll be able to, it's worth, even if you're not interested in player number 8, which you should be, it's almost worth skipping ahead to hear that. But don't do that. Listen to player number 8, which is, we just did Shaq at number 9. And while you're going through Shaq at number 9, your tendency is, Jesus, should he be higher? Like I gave all those arguments. Should he be higher? And a lot of people have him ahead of the person I have at number 8. I do not, and I will explain why. Number 8 on the 50 greatest players of the last 50 years.
Number 8, Hakeem Olajuwon.
So let's go through the resume here quickly. 6-time first-team All-NBA, 3-time second-team All-NBA, 3-time third-team All-NBA, at a time when All-NBA first-team center was a hell of a hard thing to get. You had David Robinson, you had Patrick Ewing, you had, at the beginning of his career, you had late-stage Kareem. At the end of his career, you had early-stage Shaq. So those first-team All-NBA center spots were almost impossible. He won the MVP once. He was top 5 in the MVP 6 times. He was top 7 10 times. He's a 2-time Defensive Player of the Year. More on that in a moment. He's 9-time All-Defense. He is, in my opinion, and I think it's inarguable, the best defensive player on this list. The only person who you could argue is a better defender all time is Bill Russell, and it's so different of a game back then. But in the last 50 years, he's the greatest defensive player. And I think because of that, he's become an underrated offensive player. We'll explain why. But he's 12th all-time in points. He's 9th all-time in steals. No other center is in the top 60. So all-time steals, he's 9th. No other center is in the top 60.
That is an interesting stat.
It's unbelievable. He has the most blocks ever by 600. He has, I think, 3,800 blocks. Second most is 3,200. So think about that. The guy who's in second place on the all-time blocks list would need to have 4 more seasons of 2 blocks a game to catch Hakeem. Impossible. So he's the greatest defensive player. Second on the all-time blocks list. Oh gosh, I should know that off the top of my head, but I don't. So let's find out together. We will find out together in real time. Dikembe Mutombo.
Yeah.
Dikembe Mutombo, who, by the way, Defensive Player of the Year, who Shaq annihilated in the 01 finals we were talking about. Mutombo's at 3,200. Hakeem's at 3,800. So now let's get into Hakeem's playoff resume, because everyone remembers the 2 rings. I don't think they quite remember who he went through for those 2 rings, but they certainly don't remember the fact that I think most people don't know Hakeem went to the finals before 1994. So we'll get into it. 1985, he is a rookie. They are in game 5 of round 1 against Utah. Keep in mind this is when round 1 is best of 5. So it's, do or die game. As a rookie, in his first elimination game, 32 points, 14 rebounds, 6 blocks. But they lose. He's a rookie. At that point in time, nobody was questioning the Hakeem over Michael Jordan draft pick. Nobody. Hakeem was the no doubt guy. 1986, year 2, second year, or obviously in his second year, he's in the finals. He started the playoffs off with 29 points, 15 rebounds, 4 blocks. He started round 2 off with 38 points, 16 rebounds, 4 assists, 6 steals, 5 blocks. Almost had a 5-by-5 game in the playoffs in his second year to go along with 38 points. 1 assist shy of one of the only 5-by-5 games. That's so much more important than a triple-double. That's where you have at least 5 of every category. And he would have done it with 38 points. Averaged for that round 2 series. Averaged 29 points, 13 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, 4 blocks. Can you imagine a dude averaging 4 blocks for a series today? Okay, to go up 2-1 on the defending champion Lakers, who had Kareem and Magic and Worthy, to go up 2-1 on them, he put up 40 and 12, averaged for the series 31-11 with 4 blocks, and outplayed Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. He's in his second year. In his first finals game ever against the 86 Celtics, the team that I don't argue, but some people argue is the single greatest team ever, he had 33 points, 12 rebounds. Facing elimination, down 3-1 in game 5, against what some people would argue is the greatest team ever. 32 points, 14 rebounds, and 8 blocks to keep his season alive. Averaged 24, 12, and with 3 blocks for the series, again, against... So he beats the defending champion Lakers and Kareem and Magic, and then loses in 6 to the 86 Celtics. 1987, in round 1, I'll just tell you what he averages for round 1. And some of this Hakeem stuff, it's just so consistently just outstanding across the board that I just have to give you series averages instead of individual games, because he didn't have a ton of the Shaq explosion 45-point games. It was just for a series, like in round 1, he averages 27 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, 3 steals, 5 blocks. Dude averaged 3 steals and 5 blocks. 8 stocks per game in a playoff series. Round 2 against Seattle, in a game they lose in double overtime. He had 49 points, 25 rebounds, and 6 blocks, and they lost. 1988, round 1, lost. This is one of the most impossible. You could win some money in a bar if you found the right way to phrase this as a trivia question. In round 1 in 1988, the Rockets lost to the Mavericks 3-1, despite the fact that Hakeem Olajuwon for the series, in the 4 games, and they only won 1, averaged 38 points and 17 rebounds. He had a 40-15 in a loss in game 4 to get eliminated. The only game they won, he had 41 points, 25 rebounds. So 1988 to 1992, he never got out of round 1. In those playoff years, he averaged 26 points, 14 rebounds, 2 assists, 2 steals, 4 blocks. Never got out of round 1. We talk about a guy that this was Hakeem once Sampson was done essentially. Hakeem Rockets was LeBron Cavs the first time around. Got to the finals super early, was unbelievable, always produced, and the team stunk. They couldn't put the right pieces around it. And now LeBron wasn't losing in round 1, which is why LeBron's higher on this list. But 26, 14, 2, 2, and 4 over a 4-year average in the playoffs without ever winning a series. So now we get to the meat of Hakeem, which is these next 3 years. 1993, finally gets out of the first round. How does he get out of the first round? He has a 31-point, 21 rebound, 7 block game. For that series, to finally win his first series in 5 years, he averages 29 points, 15 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, and 6 blocks per game. They lose to Seattle in overtime in Game 7 by 3 points when Hakeem puts up in that Game 7 23 points, 17 rebounds, 9 assists. So if he was not out of this world, they couldn't win.
Right.
Luckily for them, over the next 2 years, he is, in fact, out of this world. And listen to the numbers, and then at the end, listen to who he beats as he goes on to win his 2 rings and 2 finals MVPs. 1994, he wins league MVP. He wins Defensive Player of the Year. Michael Jordan has retired, so the whole league knows. So for Barkley, for Ewing, for David Robinson, who hadn't won at that point, for Stockton, for Malone, for Kemp, for Peyton, for Hakeem, for all these guys, hey, this should be our chance. So what does Hakeem do? Round 1 against Portland. I can't even give you the individual games. I'll give you one of them. But averages for round 1. 34 points, 11 rebounds, 5 assists, 2 steals, 4 blocks. He had a game in that series, another this close to 5-by-5 game, this one with 46 points. He had a 46, 8, 4, 4, and 6 against the defending Western Conference champions, Phoenix Suns, and Charles Barkley. He averages for the series 29 points, 14 rebounds, 5 assists, 4 blocks, including in Game 7 against Charles Barkley and the defending Western Conference champion Suns. Game 7, 37 points, 17 rebounds, 5 assists. Utah just knew they were drawing dead. Utah, he throws up a 41, 13, and 6 in Game 2 and demoralizes them. And then in the finals, he holds Patrick Ewing, an all-time great center, to 19 points per game. His team is up 2 with 2 seconds left in Game 6. John Starks, who is the Knicks' second best player and great three-point shooter for the era, has seemingly an open 3 to win the title. And Hakeem go gadgets it and blocks it, and they end up winning the title in Game 7. He averages for the finals 27 points, 9 rebounds, 4 assists, 4 blocks. First ring, first finals MVP. The next year, this team is the 6th seed. They are not that good of a team. They trade for Clyde Drexler midway through the year. They're kind of scuttling. Next year, to start his finals defense, puts up 45 points, 8 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 steals, 3 blocks. But they're down 2-1. Again, this is a best of 5. So they're facing elimination in Game 4. He puts up 40. Game 5, do or die game, puts up a 33-10 to advance. He's now 2, so he's won 2 do or die games in his finals defense. Then averages in that series against Utah, against Stockton and Malone, 35-9-4. The next round, they're down 3-1 to Barkley and Phoenix. They're down 3-1 despite the fact that in games 3 and 4, Hakeem scored 36 and 38. They win 3 straight games, 3 more elimination games. Win game 5, 6, and 7. Hakeem averages 30, 12, and 6 in those 3 games. They're now 5-0 in elimination games. Then, and this is unbelievable, this you got to look up on YouTube. That year, David Robinson won MVP. And they gave David Robinson the MVP on the court like they used to do before the series against Hakeem, before one of the games. And Hakeem, who's an all-time nice guy, just tortured him for the entire series, scored 40 3 times, averages 35, 13 rebounds, 5 assists, 4 blocks against the MVP of the league, David Robinson. Go ahead.
How many times did you say you won Defensive Player of the Year?
Hakeem, twice. He won 2 Defensive Players of the Year, could have won more.
Yeah,
could have won a hell of a lot.
Sounds like
no, they spread it around a bit. In the finals, playing a young guy, you may have heard of him, Shaquille O'Neal in the Orlando Magic. He scores at least 31 points in every single game, averages for the finals, 33 points, 12 rebounds, 6 assists, 2 steals, 2 blocks to sweep out Shaq and win finals MVP. Okay, so here is the totality of it. Again, remember what I said about how Ewing and Shaq and David Robinson and Patrick Ewing and John Stockton and Karl Malone and Charles Barkley, all these guys, when Jordan's gone, they're like, here's our chance. Hakeem Olajuwon beat every single one of those guys to win those 2 rings. In those 2 championship runs, he averaged 34 points, 11 rebounds, 4 assists, 2 steals, 3 blocks on 53% shooting. And beat, Clyde Drexler too. Beat Clyde Drexler, then Drexler joined him. Beat Barkley twice, beat Stockton and Malone twice, beat Patrick Ewing, beat David Robinson, beat Shaquille O'Neal. King of the mountain. Beat them all. No easy routes, no easy paths. Beat everybody who is most of those guys, except for Drexler, who joined him, and Robinson, who got one later with Tim Duncan and obviously Shaq. Most of those guys finished their careers ringless because Hakeem won both of those. In 96, keep in mind, Hakeem, we started this story in 1985. So now it's been a decade. And over that decade, from year 2 to his second ring, he was 29, 12, 3, 2, and 4 on 53%. A 10-year run in the playoffs, winning finals MVP twice, winning 2 championships, getting to 3 finals. From year 2 to his second title, averages in the playoffs, 29 points, 12 rebounds, 3 assists, 2 steals, 4 blocks. And that's the story of Hakeem Olajuwon. He's the greatest defensive player I've ever seen, and one could argue the greatest defensive player anyone's ever seen. He's the 8th greatest player of the last 50 years. Let's get to a quick Hakeem call.
Nick, clearly my time on First Things First with you is beginning to have a positive effect because you're putting Hakeem Olajuwon ahead or higher than Shaquille O'Neal is an inspired decision and one that I wholly agree with. But please tell us, why did you do it?
Here's why I did it. Shaq's apex obviously was higher. However, Hakeem's sustained excellence to go along with the fact that Shaq was a good and, for a brief period of time, great defender. Hakeem was the greatest defender. And the fact that they played each other in the finals and Hakeem swept them. For all those reasons, it is very close. It is one of the most hotly contested arguments. If you really care about this stuff, Shaq versus Hakeem. I lean Hakeem, and I think the overwhelming defensive monstrous performances, plus, like I said, the guy is considered the greatest defender ever, yet over a decade, of his prime in the playoffs averaged a touch under 30 points per game. What is he, 12th all time in points in the regular season? So it's not like the guy couldn't score. He's the 8th greatest player of the last 50 years. We'll be right back with a very special end of the show. And by the way, I'm going to complain for a moment on some of the response to this before we get to number 8. Because we put out a graphic of the list. And I've got folks who otherwise should know better saying, when there's a list like this and they include guys like Tiny Archibald or Elvin Hayes or Bernard King when they didn't see him, they're doing it based purely on the numbers. Okay, so a few things here. First of all, if you could see the exhaustive research that has gone into this, and if you watch the videos, I think you get a little taste of it. You would know it's not purely by the numbers. Obviously, it's very numerically centric. That's first of all. Second of all, there's a thing, YouTube exists, and the NBA archive exists, and the ability to watch and almost any major playoff moment of the last 50 years is at our fingertips. One of the reasons I cut it off of the last 50 years is because you don't really have access to watch the Celtics of the 60s, much less Bob Pettit and George Mikan in the 50s. There is no way to watch that. But lastly, and I've never cursed in one of these 50 greatest player videos, but I think I'm going to do it right here. By that logic, how the does anyone write about the Civil War or about Napoleon or about anything that you weren't alive for? How can anyone learn about anything they didn't see? It's like, well, what was the Civil War about? Oh, what do you, I mean, you're gonna teach me a class on it? Were you there? Did you just watch Sherman? What about Tecumseh? Get the out of here, guys. If you dedicate yourself to something and you want to do the research and you want to become learned and you want to read the firsthand accounts of the people who were there, you can learn a lot about things.
This is a shot at my dinosaur take.
No, this is not a shot at your dinosaur take, buddy. In fact, you know what? I'm going to do something before we get to the Hakeem thing. Actually, this is what we're going to do here. I am doing this right now, right before we get to the 8th greatest player, who's Hakeem Olajuwon. However, this is going to just be clipped and be put on as the final segment of the show. Okay, so it's a little extra work for the producers, but they'll be able to do it. Demonte, do me a favor. Walk over there and grab those 3 blue books that all look like they're the exact same thing. Do you see them at the top? Because I have a bookshelf behind me here that I want to show you guys something. And then also, Demonte, hand me those and then grab the brown textbook in the corner. But you can hand me, that one. Yes, hand me both of those, okay? So here's why I mentioned what I mentioned. Give me these 3 books. Okay, you can set that down. This is A Military History of the Western World, Volume 1. This is A Military History of the Western World, Volume 2. And this is A Military History of the Western World, Volume 3. So this is from the earliest times to the Battle of Lepanto. This is from the defeat of the Spanish Armada to the Battle of Waterloo. And this is from the American Civil War to the end of World War II. Well, I guess everything in these 2 books might as well be thrown in the goddamn garbage because we're talking about thousands of years ago. Who could have read it? Who could teach anything about it? So let's just pick a page for a moment. I'm going to read you a little bit something from it. No, you're sticking with me. The Rise and Expansion of Islam. This is about the Roman emperors from 565 AD. So around 1,500 years ago. So how do you think J.F.C. Fuller figured this stuff out? He did the research. Same way.
Those books got a lot of dust on them, by the way.
No, I get angry about this stuff. How about this? The World's History by Howard Spodek. This is a book I bought. You guys are going to laugh at me. This is really revealing quite a bit about me. But because I'm super interested in history, I paid $145 for this book off a college's website, bought from their bookstore. And just like was doing when I was living in LA by myself, when you the kids, you are one of the kids, but when you and your mom were in Houston, your
Yeah.
senior year, and I was in LA by myself, I just started the Industrial
that's a
Revolution.
that's an actual
No, it's a textbook.
classroom.
Yeah, Judaism and Christianity. Yeah, it's a textbook because I'm interested in learning about stuff I wasn't around to see. And that applies to world history and this NBA list. Okay? All right. All right, thanks for checking out another special episode of What's Right with Nick Wright as the special edition to the 50 greatest players of the last 50 years. The countdown continues. Next week, we get to players 7 and 6. And player 6, by definition, is not ahead of player 5, which will cause maybe the biggest fight of anything thus far on this list. You'll understand when it comes out next week. Appreciate you watching and listening. Hey, thanks for watching. Smash or just lightly tap that subscribe button. It all works the same. To get more from the show, and make sure you click. Why don't you want to mash the bell too, guys? Or just, lightly tap the bell to get notified every time new content drops. Check out full episodes of What's Right wherever you get your podcasts, or just hit the link in the description below.